Some doors only stay open for a second, yet they can change an entire lifetime. On a cool October morning, the peaceful waters of Harrison Lake reflected the first golden light of sunrise, while colorful maple leaves drifted gently across the quiet walking paths surrounding Harrison Lake Resort. Guests enjoyed steaming cups of coffee on private balconies, birds circled above the calm shoreline, and everything about the morning promised another ordinary day. Daniel Foster believed the same thing as he parked his 12-year-old pickup truck in the employee lot just before 7 o'clock. At 40 years old, he had learned that happiness was measured differently than it had been years earlier. Happiness meant hearing his 9-year-old daughter Emily laugh before school, remembering to pack the peanut butter cookies she loved in her lunchbox, and never breaking a promise once he had given his word. Before leaving home that morning, Emily had wrapped her small arms around him with complete trust. "You are still coming to my science fair tonight, right, Dad?" Daniel smiled, gently straightened her backpack, and nodded without hesitation. "I've never missed one, Emily, and I never will." Those words remained in his heart as he entered the maintenance department, greeted every co-worker with quiet kindness, collected his assignments, and prepared for another day of solving small problems before anyone else noticed they existed. Nearly an hour later, the emergency radio attached to his belt interrupted the peaceful routine. Maintenance Manager Foster, possible plumbing leak reported on the executive floor. Suite 3120. Immediate response requested. Daniel acknowledged the call, lifted his worn toolbox, and headed toward the executive elevators. Water damage inside a luxury resort could spread quickly, and every minute mattered. As he stepped onto the executive floor, sunlight poured through enormous windows overlooking Harrison Lake, filling the polished marble hallway with warm reflections. Fresh flowers decorated elegant tables. Soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers, and the hallway appeared completely empty. A young concierge hurried toward him holding a revised maintenance order. "There was a last-minute room change," she explained. "Please use this updated suite number instead. We need someone there immediately." Daniel thanked her politely, checked the paperwork carefully, and walked toward the assigned room. Reaching the elegant wooden door, he knocked firmly twice. "Maintenance," he called clearly. "Emergency service." Entering after a brief wait. Silence answered him. Following resort procedure, Daniel waited several seconds before carefully unlocking the door with his authorized master key. The door opened only slightly. Inside, Victoria Reed had just returned from the private fitness center and was changing from athletic clothing into a professional business outfit before attending confidential meetings that none of the resort staff knew were taking place. The instant Daniel realized the room was occupied, he immediately lowered his eyes, turned his face away, stepped backward, and gently raised one hand in apology. "I am very sorry," he said sincerely. "I entered the wrong room. Please accept my apology." Without taking another step inside or another glance toward the room, he carefully closed the door and continued backing into the hallway. The entire moment lasted no more than 2 seconds. At that exact instant, 2 resort security officers appeared from the far end of the corridor after an executive access notification automatically alerted them to unexpected room entry. Several nearby employees paused and quietly watched the scene unfold. Daniel stood calmly beside his weathered toolbox with respectful composure, unaware that the woman behind the closed door was not simply another guest. She was the billionaire owner of Reed Hospitality Group, and before another sunrise touched the waters of Harrison Lake, one innocent misunderstanding would begin rewriting both of their futures forever. The quietest people are often carrying the heaviest burdens, and the world rarely notices until long after it has judged them. Daniel Foster remained exactly where the security officers had politely asked him to stand, his weathered toolbox resting beside his worn work boots while warm autumn. Sunlight continued pouring through the tall windows overlooking Harrison Lake. He took one slow breath and reminded himself that honesty never became stronger by speaking louder. Years of raising Emily alone had taught him that patience often accomplished far more than arguments ever could. One of the officers approached with a professional but respectful expression. "Mr. Foster, We simply need to understand exactly what happened. Daniel nodded calmly. I received an emergency maintenance dispatch for a possible plumbing leak. A concierge handed me an updated room assignment. I knocked twice, announced that maintenance was entering for emergency service, waited for a response, unlocked the door according to company procedure, immediately realized the room was occupied, apologized, stepped back, and closed the door. His explanation contained no excuses, only facts. The second officer looked down at his report before asking another question. Did you know the guest inside the suite? Daniel answered without hesitation. No, sir. Did you remain inside the room? No, sir. Did you return after leaving? No, sir. The officers thanked him for his cooperation and quietly completed their preliminary report before leaving the hallway. The entire conversation lasted only a few minutes. Yet inside a luxury resort, curiosity often traveled much faster than truth. A pair of housekeepers exchanged uncertain glances while changing fresh linens outside another suite. Two bell attendants lowered their voices as Daniel walked through the lobby, carrying his toolbox. Even a few guests noticed the unusual attention surrounding the maintenance manager. Daniel recognized every curious look, but his expression never changed. There were still broken door locks to repair, air conditioning systems waiting for inspection, and guests expecting their vacations to remain comfortable. His responsibilities mattered more than defending himself against assumptions. Inside a private executive suite overlooking the calm lake, Victoria Reed quietly stood beside the window after finishing preparations for a confidential leadership meeting. The unexpected interruption replayed repeatedly in her thoughts. She remembered the maintenance manager immediately lowering his eyes instead of staring. She remembered hearing a sincere apology before the door gently closed. Most of all, she remembered how quickly he had chosen respect over curiosity. Her executive assistant, Claire Morgan, entered carrying a digital tablet containing the day's agenda. Security completed the initial report, Claire said. Would you like the summary before your meeting? Victoria turned toward her. What did the maintenance manager say? Claire reviewed the report. His statement remained consistent from beginning to end. He explained that he responded to an emergency dispatch, followed standard maintenance procedure, left immediately after realizing someone was inside, and returned directly to work. Victoria remained thoughtful. Did he request to speak with me? No. Did he argue with security? Not once. Did he attempt to defend himself? Claire gently shook her head. He answered every question politely and then continued his maintenance schedule. Victoria walked back toward the window where sunlight shimmered across Harrison Lake beneath colorful maple trees. Something about Daniel Foster did not match the quiet rumors beginning to circulate throughout the resort. Downstairs, Daniel spent the rest of the morning repairing a loose handrail near the lakeside walking trail before helping a young family whose stroller wheel had become wedged between decorative stone pavers. He carefully freed the wheel with a simple wrench, wished them a wonderful stay, and quietly continued toward his next assignment without expecting thanks. From a second-floor balcony overlooking the gardens, Victoria happened to witness the entire moment. There were no executives nearby, no performance evaluations taking place, and no audience he knew about. He simply helped because someone needed help. As Daniel disappeared beneath the brilliant autumn trees carrying the same worn toolbox, Victoria found herself asking a question that refused to leave her mind. What if the quiet man everyone had already judged was actually the most honorable person she had met in a very long time? Over the next several days, autumn settled gently across Harrison Lake, painting the shoreline with brilliant shades of crimson and gold, while cool morning mist floated quietly above the still water. Guests admired the peaceful scenery from private balconies, unaware that one simple misunderstanding had quietly begun changing two lives in ways neither person could yet understand. Daniel Foster arrived before sunrise every morning with the same dependable routine. After parking his aging pickup truck, he opened his lunchbox and smiled as he discovered another handwritten note from Emily tucked beside his sandwich. In careful, colorful letters she had written, "Have a wonderful day, Dad. I know you always help people. Daniel folded the note carefully and placed it inside his shirt pocket before beginning another shift. The whispers that had followed the incident on the executive floor had not completely disappeared, yet he refused to allow them to influence the way he treated anyone. Shortly after breakfast service, he noticed a young housekeeper struggling to push a heavily loaded supply cart up a gentle stone incline leading toward the lakeside cottages. Without waiting to be asked, Daniel quietly placed his toolbox on the ground, steadied the cart, and helped guide it safely to the top. The grateful employee smiled with relief. "Thank you so much. You probably have your own work waiting." Daniel returned a gentle smile. Helping each other is part of the job, too. Before she could answer again, he picked up his toolbox and continued toward his next assignment. Later that morning, an elderly guest accidentally dropped a leather wallet beneath a decorative wooden bridge crossing one of the resort gardens. Several visitors walked by without noticing, but Daniel immediately climbed down the grassy bank, carefully retrieved the wallet, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and returned it with both hands. The grateful gentleman reached for his pocket, hoping to offer a reward, but Daniel politely shook his head. "Please keep it. I hope the rest of your vacation becomes even better." The older man smiled warmly, thanking him several times before walking away. Unknown to Daniel, Victoria Reed had observed the entire exchange from a second-floor terrace overlooking the gardens. She had stepped outside only to review confidential meeting notes, yet once again her attention drifted toward the quiet maintenance manager. No supervisor stood nearby. No executive evaluation was taking place. There was no audience that Daniel believed would ever notice his actions. His kindness seemed completely natural, almost effortless. During the afternoon, another small moment quietly settled into Victoria's memory. A little boy visiting the resort accidentally let go of a bright red balloon, and the string became caught beneath a wooden bench beside the lakeside path. Before the child's parents even reached him, Daniel calmly knelt, loosened the string without damaging the balloon, and handed it back with an encouraging smile. The little boy hugged the balloon tightly before unexpectedly wrapping one arm around Daniel's waist in gratitude. Daniel laughed softly, thanked the child for making his day brighter, and wished the family a wonderful stay. Watching from a nearby garden path, Victoria found herself smiling without realizing it. She remembered the uncomfortable morning outside the executive suite, yet every passing day revealed another quiet example of the man Daniel truly was. As golden afternoon sunlight shimmered across Harrison Lake and colorful leaves drifted gently through the cool breeze, Victoria began to understand something that years of boardroom success had nearly caused her to forget. True character was never revealed during extraordinary moments. It revealed itself through ordinary choices made when no recognition was expected, no reward was offered, and no one important seemed to be watching except a quiet conscience that never stopped choosing what was right. By the end of the week, autumn had completely transformed the hills surrounding Harrison Lake, covering every walking path with brilliant shades of amber and crimson, while a cool breeze carried the scent of pine through the peaceful resort grounds. Guests admired the beautiful scenery without realizing that one woman had begun seeing the entire property through different eyes. Victoria Reed had spent years leading one of the nation's most respected hospitality companies by trusting facts instead of assumptions. Yet one quiet maintenance manager had challenged that principle without ever trying to impress her. Early that afternoon, rather than reviewing financial reports before another executive meeting, Victoria quietly entered the Human Resources office. The director, Margaret Collins, welcomed her into a private conference room before placing a single personnel file on the polished oak table. Victoria thanked her, opened the folder, and slowly began reading. The first pages contained routine employment information, annual performance evaluations, maintenance certifications, and safety training records. Then she reached the letters written by guests and co-workers. One elderly veteran described how Daniel Foster had stayed well beyond the end of his shift to repair a damaged wheelchair so the family vacation could continue without interruption. Another guest thanked him for finding a little girl's favorite stuffed rabbit after searching behind heavy laundry equipment for nearly an hour. Several employees wrote that Daniel often volunteered to work holiday shifts so coworkers with young children could celebrate Christmas morning at home. Every evaluation described the same qualities: reliable, humble, honest, compassionate. There is not a single disciplinary action, formal complaint, or record of conflict anywhere in the file. Margaret quietly watched Victoria finish reading before speaking. People remember Daniel because he never makes anyone feel invisible. Victoria turned another page and paused. Attached near the back of the folder was an emergency contact form listing only one family member: Emily Foster, daughter, 9 years old, no spouse, no additional emergency contact. Victoria looked up thoughtfully. He has been raising her by himself? Margaret nodded gently. His wife passed away several years ago after a sudden illness. He almost never talks about it. He simply says that Emily deserves a father who always keeps his promises. Those words lingered in the quiet room long after Margaret stopped speaking. Victoria carefully closed the folder, thanked her sincerely, and left the office without another question. Later that afternoon, while traveling between inspections, her car passed Maple Grove Elementary School just as families gathered outside for the annual science fair. Curious, Victoria asked the driver to slow down. Through the entrance, she immediately recognized Daniel walking briskly across the parking lot carrying a small bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers wrapped in simple brown paper. His expression revealed the quiet concern of a father hoping he had not arrived too late. The moment Emily spotted him, her face lit up with pure happiness. She ran directly into his arms while proudly holding a colorful science project. Daniel laughed warmly, handed her the flowers, and apologized with genuine regret. Traffic took longer than I expected. Emily smiled as though nothing else mattered. You still came. Daniel gently rested one hand on her shoulder and answered with complete sincerity. I promised you that I would. Victoria remained inside the car, silently watching father and daughter walk into the school together beneath rows of glowing autumn trees. In that simple moment, she realized that the man so many people had quietly judged because of one unfortunate misunderstanding had built his entire life around something far more valuable than reputation. He had built it around keeping every promise that mattered. The following Monday began beneath a sky of soft gray clouds drifting quietly above Harrison Lake, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of rain across the peaceful resort grounds. Daniel Foster followed his familiar morning routine, greeting coworkers with the same calm smile that never seemed affected by rumors or recognition. He inspected heating systems, repaired a loose deck railing overlooking the lake, and helped prepare the conference center for an executive meeting scheduled later that afternoon. Nothing about the day seemed unusual to him. Yet for Victoria Reed, it had become impossible to ignore the quiet questions that continued growing in her heart. Shortly before noon, she entered the resort security office accompanied only by Claire. Morgan, I would like to review the hallway recording from last Tuesday morning, Victoria said calmly. The security supervisor immediately retrieved the archive footage and displayed it on a large monitor. The timestamp appeared in the corner of the screen as the familiar executive hallway came into view. Victoria watched without speaking. Daniel entered carrying his weathered toolbox and stopped outside the assigned suite. He knocked twice exactly as company procedure required. His lips clearly formed the word maintenance before he waited several respectful seconds. After receiving no reply, he unlocked the door, pushed it open only slightly, and immediately froze. The instant he realized someone was inside, he lowered his eyes, turned his head away, stepped backward without hesitation, apologized, and gently closed the door. The entire sequence lasted barely 2 seconds. Victoria asked for the recording to be replayed. Then she watched it again. And once more, every angle confirmed the same simple truth. Daniel had never taken another step into the room. He had never stared. He had never hesitated before leaving. He had done exactly what an honorable professional should have done. Silence filled the security office as Victoria slowly exhaled. "He was completely innocent," she whispered. The supervisor nodded respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. Our investigation reached the same conclusion. There was never any evidence of inappropriate conduct." Victoria lowered her eyes for a moment, disappointed not in Daniel, but in herself. She had allowed uncertainty to linger even after her instincts had begun telling her a different story. Although she had never publicly accused him of wrongdoing, she also had not immediately sought him out to acknowledge the truth. As a leader, she believed integrity required more than avoiding unfair judgment. It required correcting it. Meanwhile, Daniel spent the afternoon replacing worn light fixtures along the lakeside boardwalk before stopping to help a little girl whose toy sailboat had become trapped beneath a wooden dock. Using nothing more than a long maintenance pole and a patient smile, he carefully guided the toy back within her. "Reach." The child hugged the little boat tightly while her grateful parents thanked him again and again. Daniel simply wished them a wonderful afternoon and quietly continued toward his next assignment beneath the brilliant autumn trees. Standing on a nearby balcony, Victoria watched the scene unfold with new understanding. The man below had no idea that every doubt surrounding him had disappeared forever. He also had no idea that the woman watching him had already made a decision that would soon change both of their lives. Before another sunset reflected across Harrison Lake, Victoria promised herself she would speak to Daniel personally, not as the owner of a hospitality empire, but as one human being who owed another the honesty, respect, and heartfelt apology he had quietly deserved from the very beginning. Late that afternoon, the golden light of early November stretched across Harrison Lake, turning the calm water into a mirror of amber and copper while gentle waves touched the wooden docks surrounding the resort. Daniel Foster had just completed a routine inspection of the lakeside guest cottages when a maintenance radio clipped to his belt softly crackled. "Maintenance Manager Foster, would you please come to the Lakeside Conservatory? A guest would like to speak with you." The request sounded calm, almost personal, and Daniel quietly gathered his worn toolbox before walking toward the elegant glass conservatory overlooking the lake. Sunlight streamed through towering windows framed by climbing ivy, while rows of white orchids filled the room with a delicate fragrance. Victoria Reed stood alone near the glass wall, dressed in a simple navy business suit instead of the formal executive attire she had worn during confidential meetings. She turned as Daniel entered, offering a gentle smile that carried gratitude rather than authority. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. Daniel nodded politely. "How may I help you today?" For several quiet seconds, neither of them spoke. Outside, a flock of geese crossed the lake beneath the brilliant autumn sky, and the peaceful silence somehow made honest words easier to find. Victoria finally took a slow breath. "I reviewed the complete security investigation this morning." Daniel listened without interruption. "I watched every second of the hallway recording several times," she continued. "You followed every company procedure exactly as you should have. You announced yourself, waited before entering, immediately turned away, apologized, and left the moment you realized the room was occupied. You did absolutely nothing wrong." Daniel remained calm, his expression unchanged except for a quiet understanding in his eyes. Victoria lowered her gaze briefly before speaking again. "I owe you an apology. Not because anyone demanded it, but because it is the right thing to do. I allowed uncertainty to exist longer than it ever should have." Daniel looked through the tall windows toward Harrison Lake before answering. "Sometimes unexpected moments confuse everyone involved. I never believed anyone was trying to be unfair." Victoria searched his face with genuine surprise. "You are not angry with me." Daniel smiled gently. "Anger would not improve either of our lives. I have learned that peace usually carries people farther than resentment." His words settled softly between them while golden leaves drifted outside the conservatory. Victoria slowly smiled, realizing that the man standing before her possessed a quiet strength that could never be measured by job title or paycheck. "Most people would have defended themselves much more loudly," she admitted. Daniel rested one hand on the handle of his old toolbox. The truth does not become stronger because someone repeats it over and over. If a person lives honestly every day, eventually the truth finds its own voice. Victoria nodded thoughtfully, feeling those simple words remain with her far longer than any executive speech she had ever heard. I also learned about Emily, she said gently. Daniel's face immediately softened with unmistakable warmth. She is my greatest blessing. Victoria Smaid. I can tell. Anyone who keeps every promise to a child understands what real responsibility looks like. Daniel quietly laughed. She reminds me every morning what kind of father I hope to become. The conversation gradually shifted toward ordinary life, favorite books, peaceful places around Harrison Lake, and childhood memories instead of the misunderstanding that had first connected them. When Daniel finally picked up his toolbox to leave, Victoria thanked him once more, this time with complete sincerity. As he walked toward the conservatory doors beneath the warm afternoon light, neither of them realized that something much greater than forgiveness had quietly begun taking root. Respect had replaced doubt, honesty had overcome misunderstanding, and two strangers had taken the first genuine step toward becoming an unexpected part of each other's future. The quiet days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm neither Daniel Foster nor Victoria Reed had expected. The misunderstanding that had once stood between them slowly faded into memory, replaced by conversations that began with simple greetings and somehow always ended with both of them smiling a little more than before. Victoria continued walking through different areas of Harrison Lake Resort without revealing that she owned every building surrounding the peaceful shoreline. She preferred being treated like an ordinary guest because it allowed her to see people exactly as they truly were. Daniel never questioned her presence. He simply enjoyed talking with someone who appreciated quiet mornings, honest work, and the beauty of ordinary moments. One crisp Saturday morning, Daniel was repairing an old wooden bench overlooking Harrison Lake after several windy days had loosened the support bolts. Victoria approached carrying 2 paper cups of freshly brewed coffee from the small lakeside cafe. I thought you might enjoy a short break, she said with a warm smile. Daniel accepted 1 cup gratefully. Thank you. That was thoughtful. They sat together while gentle waves shimmered beneath the clear autumn sky and a pair of graceful swans drifted peacefully across the lake. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence felt comfortable instead of awkward. Victoria quietly laughed. Most people become uncomfortable when nobody is talking. Daniel watched the swans glide through the golden reflections. Sometimes silence says everything. That matters. Victoria looked toward him with quiet admiration. Very few people spoke with such calm certainty. A few days later, she discovered that one tire on her rental sedan had gone completely flat near the botanical gardens inside the resort. Before she could contact roadside assistance, Daniel happened to finish another maintenance assignment nearby. He noticed the problem immediately and smiled kindly. Looks like your afternoon changed its plans. Victoria smiled back. It certainly did. Daniel calmly replaced the tire while explaining each step with patient confidence, never making her feel embarrassed or helpless. When the work was finished, Victoria reached into her purse, hoping to thank him properly. Daniel gently raised one hand. Please do not. Helping someone should never feel like a business transaction. Victoria slowly returned her wallet to her purse, realizing once again that his generosity appeared whenever nobody expected it. Later that week, Daniel mentioned that Emily would be participating in the annual Harvest Festival at Maple Grove Elementary School. She has been practicing for weeks, he said proudly. If you have free time, you will be welcome. Victoria accepted the invitation without hesitation. On Saturday evening, she arrived wearing a simple cream sweater, blue jeans, and comfortable boots instead of designer clothing. Emily greeted her with bright curiosity before proudly showing her handmade science ribbon, autumn artwork, and favorite classroom. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that made Emily laugh again and again. As the festival continued, they sampled homemade apple pie, admired colorful pumpkin displays, and applauded every child performing on the small outdoor stage. Only after nearly an hour of talking, laughing, and sharing simple moments did Emily naturally slip one small hand into Daniel's and the other into Victoria's while they walked beneath glowing string lights and falling maple leaves. Neither adult mentioned the quiet gesture. They simply continued walking together beneath the cool evening sky, each step feeling a little more natural than the last. In that peaceful autumn evening, they no longer resembled strangers connected by an unfortunate misunderstanding. Without either of them realizing it, they had quietly begun becoming something that felt remarkably close to a family waiting patiently for the right moment to discover itself. The first week of November arrived beneath a brilliant blue sky, and Harrison Lake Resort prepared for its annual leadership conference with quiet precision. Fresh white lilies decorated the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm golden light across polished hardwood floors, and employees from every property within Reed Hospitality Group gathered for the company's most important event of the year. Daniel Foster had no intention of attending the conference. His assignment that morning was simply to repair a malfunctioning projection system inside the ballroom before the executive presentations began. Carrying his familiar weathered toolbox, he carefully replaced a damaged control module, tested every display twice, and quietly packed his equipment. The event coordinator smiled with relief. "Everything is working perfectly now. Thank you, Daniel." He nodded politely. "I'm glad everything is ready." As he prepared to leave through the rear entrance, the lights gradually dimmed and soft orchestral music filled the ballroom. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage with a confident smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder, chairwoman, and chief executive officer of Reed Hospitality Group." Every conversation immediately stopped. Hundreds of employees rose to their feet in respectful applause. Daniel turned toward the stage almost absent-mindedly, expecting to see an executive he had never met before. The spotlight illuminated the entrance, and his footsteps froze. Victoria Reed walked gracefully across the stage wearing an elegant ivory business suit, her calm confidence filling the room without a single unnecessary gesture. Daniel stared in complete disbelief. Every peaceful conversation beside Harrison Lake, every shared cup of coffee, every quiet walk through the gardens, every smile Emily had shared with her, and every unanswered question suddenly formed one unmistakable truth. The woman he believed was simply another thoughtful guest was the billionaire owner of the entire company where he worked. Victoria's eyes briefly met his across the ballroom, and a warm smile appeared before she stepped behind the podium. "Good morning, everyone," she began. Her voice carried warmth instead of distance. "Each year we gather to celebrate growth, innovation, and financial success. Those achievements matter, but today I would like to begin by honoring something even more valuable: character." The ballroom became completely silent. Victoria continued. "Several weeks ago, I met an employee during an unexpected misunderstanding. That employee could have become defensive. He could have demanded explanations. Instead, he chose dignity, patience, and respect. In the weeks that followed, I quietly observed the way he treated guests, coworkers, and complete strangers. I discovered that his character never changed whether anyone important was watching or not." Daniel lowered his eyes, realizing every word described him. Victoria looked toward the back of the ballroom. "Mr. Daniel Foster, would you please join me on stage?" A clear pathway opened through the audience as employees stepped respectfully aside. Daniel slowly walked forward, carrying the same worn toolbox that had accompanied him every day since he first arrived at the resort. When he reached the stage, Victoria extended her hand with sincere admiration. Daniel accepted it with quiet humility. Turning once more toward the audience, Victoria smiled gently. "This man reminded me that genuine leadership is never measured by titles, offices, or wealth. It begins with integrity, compassion, and the courage to continue doing what is right even when your character is quietly being questioned." Thunderous applause echoed throughout the grand ballroom, yet Daniel barely heard it. The greatest surprise was not discovering who Victoria truly was. It was realizing that the woman he had come to respect had chosen to see his heart long before revealing the extraordinary responsibility hidden behind her own name. The standing ovation filled the grand ballroom for what felt like an eternity, yet Daniel Foster wished only to return quietly to the maintenance department and complete the work he had left unfinished. Standing beside Victoria Reed with his weathered toolbox resting near his feet, he looked far more comfortable in silence than beneath the admiration of hundreds of employees. When the applause finally faded, Victoria stepped back to the podium with a gentle smile that reflected gratitude instead of authority. "There's one more announcement I would like to make," she said warmly. "Today I would like to offer Daniel Foster a new opportunity within Reed Hospitality Group. This is not simply a promotion. It is an invitation to help shape the culture of every property we own. I believe the people who teach us the greatest lessons about leadership are often the ones who never ask to lead." Every eye in the ballroom turned toward Daniel. He looked at Victoria with sincere appreciation before answering honestly. "Thank you for believing in me. I never expected anything beyond the chance to do my work well every day." Victoria nodded gently. "I know. That is exactly why I hope you will consider this role. We can discuss every detail together in the coming weeks, but today I simply want everyone here to know that integrity deserves to be recognized." Daniel smiled quietly. "If accepting this opportunity allows me to continue serving people with the same values that brought me here, then I would be honored to explore it." The ballroom responded with another heartfelt round of applause, yet what Daniel remembered most was not the sound. It was the quiet respect reflected in the faces of people who had once doubted him. Several weeks later, after thoughtful conversations with the leadership team and careful planning, Daniel officially accepted his new position overseeing guest experience and employee culture throughout the company. He approached the responsibility exactly as he had approached every maintenance request, believing that small acts of kindness could quietly transform an entire organization. Employees soon noticed meaningful changes. Managers spent more time listening. New staff members felt welcomed instead of overlooked. Guests returned year after year because they felt genuinely cared for rather than simply accommodated. Victoria continued visiting Harrison Lake Resort without announcing her arrival, often joining Daniel for peaceful morning walks beside the lake before the first guests began their day. Their conversations rarely focused on business. Instead, they talked about Emily's school projects, favorite books, holiday traditions, and the simple beauty found in ordinary moments. As December covered Harrison Lake with a gentle blanket of fresh snow, Victoria accepted Daniel's invitation to spend Christmas Eve at his modest home. Warm light from a stone fireplace filled the living room, while a small Christmas tree displayed handmade ornaments collected over many years. The scent of cinnamon cookies drifted through the house as Emily proudly served hot chocolate to both adults. Throughout the evening, they decorated cookies together, laughed over old family stories, and listened to classic Christmas songs while snowflakes quietly covered the neighborhood outside. Later that night, Emily sat between Daniel and Victoria on the sofa, holding one hand from each of them. She looked first at her father, then at Victoria, before speaking with the simple honesty only a child could possess. "I know families are built with love," she whispered. "If someday you are ready, would it make you happy if I called you Mom?" Tears quietly filled Victoria's eyes as she looked toward Daniel. He smiled with peaceful gratitude and gently nodded. Victoria wrapped Emily in a loving embrace before softly answering, "Sweetheart, if that day ever comes, I will spend every single day trying to deserve that wonderful gift." Daniel placed his hand over theirs as the fire crackled gently nearby, and fresh snow continued falling beyond the windows. In the quiet warmth of that humble home, misunderstanding had become understanding, respect had become trust, and trust had quietly grown into a family built not by wealth or circumstance, but by dignity, kindness, faithful promises, and hearts that never stopped believing in the goodness of one another.